want to track how many calls I'm making. If I'm trying to get in shape, I'm not necessarily going to track the weight I'm doing. I'm going to track how many calories I'm eating. And so the more ways you measure, the more ways you can win. And so the idea, the ultimate win at life is where you can shift things that are out of your control that you deem winning to things that are under your control, which you can deem winning. Because if you're measuring on whether you lost the fat or not, sometimes people take longer, some people don't. That's something that you actually can't control. What you can control are the inputs. And so if you say, based on this, if I do this one thing every day for a long enough period of time, I'll eventually get there. The real winners cut out the I'll eventually get there and say, if I do this every day, I have won. The thing that I try and focus on now is the delta between how hard I tried and how hard I can possibly try. And if I know that the gap between those two is 0, then I have won. And I've decided to spend an inordinate amount of effort trying to make that my definition of winning, is that there's nothing left in the tank. If you get into a harder career path or one that takes more reps to get good at or more reps to get into, then every day you can win based on saying like, everyone else does 100, I do 250, and I have nothing left to give, I won. And that should satisfy you. And if you're obsessive on the external thing, that takes too long and you will give up too soon. One of the things that took me too long to learn was the difference between the finite and infinite frame. And so finite frame is where you have known players, agreed upon rules, and a way to win or lose at the end, and then the game is over. In infinite frame, you have known and unknown players, no agreed upon rules, and the point of the game is to keep the game going. And all the greatest games that I've ever participated in, marriage, health, business, you don't win at marriage. The point is to stay married. You don't win at health, the point is to stay in shape. You don't win at business, the point is to stay in business. And so by default, if you don't give up, you win. And so that's the big frame shift, which is why leaving everything on the field is the way you have to define winning if you want to win in the long term. And anything worth doing takes great time. If you stick with it and you make that the win, you'll notice that the external win will just happen on its own. And if you really commit to that perspective, it won't even mean much to you.
Why is it that some students get A stars and others get C's and D's? So the difference is
because if you make that everything, it's the same thing with the guys who win the golds and then kill themselves, or win the championship and then go to these massive depressions. It's because they're playing the wrong game. When Kobe was asked shortly before he died, like, do you think that you're somebody who's afraid of losing, or do you think you're somebody who loves winning? He basically denied both frames. He said, I'm paraphrasing, I just love playing to the best of my ability. And that's what he measures himself off of. The fact that the world chooses to measure him on the fact that he's won so many games, that's the world's problem, not ours. It's saying I'm game master, not a player, and I choose to play by these rules, and as long as I am playing, I win by default. And it's because I'm not accepting the world's rules for winning, I make my own. An easier analogy here is, and this is a Naval Ravikant quote, he said, what looks like work to other people should feel like play for you. If you look at an artist and he's painting, you're like, hey, how soon are you gonna finish that painting? The point for the artist is to paint. He'll finish that piece and he'll start the next one. But the process of painting is the thing that they enjoy. And so the idea is that if you can commit, and the broader you can generalize what you're committing to, the easier it will be to stick with it. So you might be like, I love making calls, but I hate entering things in the CRM. Well, both of those are required for the role of sales. And so I prefer to chunk up a level and say, I prefer to do hard work because of what that work does to me. Then whether I'm putting shit into the CRM or editing a document or having a hard conversation, all of those things are difficult, and I see those as all contributing to the person I ultimately want to be until eventually I die and it won't matter anyways. And so the only asset that you really get to keep with you is your character, and that's the only thing you keep building. And so if you make the character the W, at the end of the day, did I not contribute to the character of the person that I want to become? If that's the W every day, you can never lose. If you have your menu option of things that you can do in life, just remove quitting as one of them and then try your next idea. And if you are in that Rocky cutscene and you're 2 months in, 3 months in, remember that the Rocky cutscene in the movie lasts a couple seconds and the Rocky cutscene in real life might last a few years. And so whenever I get to a low point where I think, why do I even bother doing this? I just like to remind myself, this is where most people stop and this is why they don't win. And as hard as this is going to sound, the best thing that I ever did was not listen to other people's opinions about my life. They don't want the best version of you. They want the version of you who best serves them. And unfortunately, The closer people are to you, the more similarly they'll see themselves and you, and the more your success will make them feel bad about themselves. And I can promise you this from somebody who might be a little further. I have more people who root for me now that I've already won than people who rooted for me along the way. No one is doing as well as you think they're doing. So by comparison, everyone is better off than they think. Because the cumulative median visually is probably 3 times higher than what the actual median is. And so if you're like, oh, I'm average or slightly below average compared to the perceived median of society, you're probably way above average. And that's okay. And being above or below average doesn't even matter anyways, because you've got a lot of innings left. There's a lot of quarters left to play. And so like until the day you die, you still have hope, you still have a chance, you can still keep moving forward. Whenever someone gives you their opinion about what you should do with your life, it's really them saying, this is my preference of how I want to live my life. And I say, great, live your life that way and I'll live my life this way. Because me living my life has no effect on you. So live your life the way you want to live it. And I don't want your life either. They make those statements because they feel uncomfortable. And so they have to release it. And so they say that to you to make themselves feel better. And that's their problem, not yours. I think I've learned a lot of frames around not caring about other people's opinions out of necessity, because I was so crippled by the opinions of other people for what felt like such a long time that I always had to face my death in order to get myself to move. And so I talk about death a lot because it has actually been one of the few things that actually motivates me to change my behavior. And so when I had done all the things that I thought would impress other people, one, I realized that they didn't really care. And secondly, I realized that I deeply cared about how much I hated my life. When I was like, is this what winning feels like? Because if this is what winning is, then I don't want to play. By thinking I'd rather be dead than continue to play this game, I was forced to change the game I was playing, which is like, well, what is a game that I would like to win at? Well, I'd like to win a game that is by rules that I set out and there are things that I can control. And then those people, because you break their mold of what they're supposed to be doing, and they might be miserable too, but they are not willing to take the risk that you're willing to take because they care about other people's opinions more than you do because they haven't gone through that little journey that you just went through. Fine. You do it your way, they do it their way. I mean, I went from prodigal son, my father's super proud of me, graduating Vanderbilt in 3 years, president of the fraternity, vice president of the powerlifting team, management consultant, to a minimum wage employee. Like, that's a pretty significant drop in status. I have these frames because people will say whatever they want, but for me, that relative drop in status was a lot. I went from about as high status as you can get as a 22-year-old to about as low status as you can get. I mean, I remember having people be like, so did you go to college? And I was like, yeah, I went to college and I fucking murdered it and I did everything. And because the implied question is, why are you here? And so that's what, in the beginning, hurt a ton. But then I just realized that they just didn't know. And they were asking genuinely. And all of my judgment around that was just my own problem. How I'm perceiving this question is affecting my mood to such a great degree. What if I applied this to every question? All these people are asking me things and I'm either getting offended or getting complimented, but the statement doesn't change. So that sounds like a me problem. And so the more I started diving into things like that, the less bothered I became by everyone else's opinion, because they also have no context. Even if they did mean it as an insult, so what? If they're saying, well, I'm better than you, I'd be like, yes, you are. A lot of even really successful people frame their success around trying to prove someone wrong, right? But when you try and create your entire existence in opposition to someone, you actually give them complete control over your life. It means that because of the things that this person has said, I will choose to change all of my behavior, which basically means that the directives from that person have commanded you to do whatever you do. And if you like to be a free person and want to be somebody who acts of their own volition, then I choose to accept insults so that I can live my life rather than living in contrast to them and giving my control to the person who insulted me. That would mean I put me changing your mind above my goals, which I don't do. My goals are more important to me than changing your mind. I'm super sensitive to I am statements, labeling statements like this. Like, I'm a neat freak. I'm the type of person who. So whenever you're dating someone, you're getting to know someone, people like to blanket I am statements really early on to set the stage. Like, I'm the type of person who likes to show up early. I like to clean things. I'm a labeler. I'm a whatever. And then, and this is the insidious part, they then say because. And then they insert a reason that they made up or that sounded good in the past and people nodded their heads and agreed with. Because my mom never loved me enough, because I didn't get enough hugs, because I gave a speech once and everyone laughed at me, because you don't know. And the reality is you will never know. All we know is that you do a certain type of behavior. That's it. By giving these because statements all this power, you actually put all the power into something that is unchangeable in the past, and so you have to keep dealing with it. Whereas if you just said, I do these things, period. Now, if I want to change what I do, then I should just reward myself in the present for doing something different. And that makes it a lot more malleable, and it makes your identity and what you do as a result, or rather what you do and your identity as a result, something under your control. You don't want to blame the things in the past that you can't change. You want to blame things in the present that you can. So if you said, I have trouble getting close to girls because my mom and I aren't close, one, you give your mother all the power in your love life. Ugh. You give power to something that happened in the past that you can't change, to things that are happening in the present that you can change. And so wouldn't it be more useful to say, in the past, I have struggled to get close to girls, period. Now that could be for a number of reasons. Thing is that you don't know what reason it is. Because I could say, let's say imagine all these things happen. You struggled with your mom. Let's say you had a bad breakup at some point in your life. You're not in shape. I could say, I struggle getting close to girls. And I could use any of those three as my reasons. But which of those serve me? None of them. All we know is that you struggle to get close to girls. Okay, well then just look at what it would take to get close to girls and then do that, rather than having this other thing that's attached to the behavior that you can't do anything about. It just makes changing who you are and what you do a lot easier. Sometimes people are such douchebags. They will tell a young child, you will never have a successful relationship with a woman because you don't respect or love me. A mother. Or the reverse could be true of a father. They're a fucking douchebag for saying that because they are labeling you with something that you can't change. But that's their problem. It also is no basis in fact. When people are like, look at how the son treats the mother, that's how he's gonna treat his wife. Why the fuck would I treat my wife like I treat my mother? Dear God, ugh. That's just a statement that sounds good, but has no basis in fact. You treat your wife like you treat your wife, you treat your mother like you treat your mother. They're different people. People want to have problems because it gives them a reason to suck and it be okay. It gives them ego padding so they can protect themselves for the reason why they're not successful, for the reason they haven't accomplished what they said they were going to accomplish. And so they lean on their potential, and their trauma as the two reasons that people prop up. I've got lots of potential, but I have all this trauma, and neither of those matter. I've gone through 3 stages of mental development in terms of how I see changing my behavior. In the beginning, I attributed my behavior to my past traumas. The second phase was that I chose to change the story. What if my mother was just trying to feel better and it wasn't my fault? So then I changed my behavior in that sense. The third phase, which is where I'm at now, maybe there'll be a fourth phase, but the third phase was I behave this way, period. The because statement in the second half is completely irrelevant. 1, because I don't know it. 2, because I can't change it. So I might as well just choose to do the thing that I want to do, irrelevant of my past. The single strongest predictor of my behavior is what will make the more epic story. I've thought about that frame a lot and it's still continued to win out. And so when I'm forced to make a decision between 2 things, I prefer to choose the one that's the more epic story. Because either you have an epic story of failure or you have an epic story of success, but no 85-year-olds are regretting their epic stories. They are regretting the stories they never told. Our minds are meaning-making machines, and they have to be because they create associations between things we know and things we don't know, and that's how we learn. The problem is that our brains will make wrong associations, and then they will plague us for the rest of our lives, but we can just redefine what the association means for ourselves to make our lives easier. Because whether you miss the game-winning shot when there's a huge crowd or you miss it when no one else is there, the only reason it hurts more is because you choose to let it hurt you more. Now, there are things that you can do prior to the game-winning shot that can increase the likelihood that you make it, which is that you practice way more in high-stakes conditions over and over and over again. And if you do that, it increases the likelihood, your confidence, that you'll be able to make it. Why? Because you've made them before. And if you're like, well, I missed my first ever game-winning shot, now what do I do? Well, you practice in every other condition that's as close to that as you can until eventually you make one. And then when you do make one, you'll have evidence that you've made one and you try and make one again. What you probably don't know is that Michael Jordan has missed more game-winning shots than he has made, but he's remembered for the ones that he made. But how was he able to make them? By missing and being willing to shoot again. On that basis of story, the many excuses that we give ourselves in reverse can make a more epic story. And so rather than say like, these are all the reasons that I can't succeed, I think reframing that as, these are all the reasons that when I succeed, it'll be even better story and it'll be more inspiring to other people is a much more powerful frame. The more disadvantages you have when you start, the more epic story you have when you win. Donald Miller has one of the most powerful frames of heroes and villains I've ever heard of. Heroes and villains always have the same backstory.